reckon?
No, he said earlier on and all through the weekend that the Alfa Romeos have been so much quicker, and he feels that he's not going to be able to keep them behind. Yes, I'm pretty sure he'll get past Tivano early on off the line and lead the race to start with, but after that the Alfas will catch them, and they have been just so dominant. And as he said earlier on, he thinks they actually slowed down towards the end of that first race just to try and make it look a little bit not so dominant, and so they don't get too much of a penalty. There are of course penalties for those that do very well, and as we said earlier on, the BMWs are the people who scored all the points before they arrived here. The two works cars, Jörg Müller having 40 kilos extra, Dirk Müller 35 kilos extra, and Andy Prio 25 kilos extra. That's obviously hurting these cars here this weekend, but obviously that will change when we get to the next meeting. On the basis the Alfa Romeos do what we expect them to do and finish 1, 2, 3 again, they will arrive at the next meeting with all that weight on, and the BMWs will be losing it. So it is swings and roundabouts. They do use the weight to try and make sure that everyone has a fair chance of having a win and having a go at be able to doing that winning, standing on the podium.
Well, you're right, it doesn't matter how little the Alfa Romeos win by. If they do win, they get the weight penalty, whether they win by a minute, a lap, or a tenth of a second. So in that way, it doesn't sort of particularly affect the weight. But I think the point that Jörg was making definitely is that Alfa Romeo are sandbagging once they get in front to make sure that they're not really staringly, obviously, too fast, so that they don't get any extra penalties like different air restrictors or something else applied to the factory cars. But it's been BMW's war cry since the beginning of this new Super 2000 series of European Touring Car Championship that the Alfa Romeos are quicker, and it's always been the case right from the start. The Alfa Romeos used to be able to just pull out and drive by in a straight line like they're in a completely different class of racing. That's no longer the case, and there are circuits where BMW has a big advantage. Oschersleben in Germany, very tight, twisty track, is one of them. We saw the BMWs keeping the Alfas firmly at bay there. But next time out in a fortnight, Manicourt in France, it's another flat, open, wide Grand Prix track. It's a real racetrack for Alfa Romeos. It's a motorway, and anywhere where they can get the hammer down for a prolonged period, the BMW's rear drive launch off the corners just doesn't help them. And even here at tight and twisty Valencia, there's not enough launch off the corners for the BMWs to help. And one of the other BMW problems is the 5-speed gearbox. They're using a manual 5-speed gearbox, stick shift. All the others are using a manual shifted semi-automatic gearbox, but the front-wheel drive cars using a 6-speed box. BMW have not built a 6-speed 3 Series racing gearbox. They're using a 5-speed one. And as a result, again, Andy Prio saying this morning that around the back of the circuit in the infield section, the tight and twisty 3rd and 4th gear corners, well actually they're not really 3rd or 4th gear corners. You're either too low in the rev range in 4th or too high in 3rd in a 5-speed box. There's not enough variety of the spacing of the gears, and he thinks there particularly the front wheel drive Seat Toledos and Alfa Romeos are finding more of their advantage. And obviously that's a fairly major handicap that you can't just change in a heartbeat. BMW have been racing varieties of the 3 Series for the last 10 or 15 years successfully in Super Touring and Touring Car Championship categories, and it's a very well developed engine and gearbox package, but redeveloping it is another major investment.
So as they're lining up here, we've just heard that a couple of cars won't be starting. Car 45, one of the Oregon team, one of those brightly coloured Alfa Romeos, Barton, he will not be starting in Alfa Romeo. He's got transmission problems, and we notice that Diefenbagger is missing with a Seat, and we don't know why he's not starting, but we know he's not starting. He pulled out about 3 laps into the race. But the other two that disappeared early on, Rydell and Genet, are at the back of the grid.
Lights are on, and Salvatore Tivano in pole position. Let's see him get swamped by the BMWs. Here comes Antonio Garcia, here too. Outstarting Andy Prio comes Dirk Müller and Jörg Müller. Andy Prio from 5th place on the grid. On board with him, there is the Oregon team car. He's got to avoid trouble because Alfa Romeos are behind him. That's Alex Zanardi getting in amongst them, and Tom Coronel as well. And look at that! There is the pole man way off into the dirt. Or no, it wasn't. It was his teammate, perhaps, the Oregon car, Luca Rangoni, who didn't, yes, there is the pole man, who didn't finish the first race either. Rangoni, a multiple champion in Renault 1-make series, but obviously not doing so well here. Garcia under pressure. The Schnitzer car, the number 42, is Jörg Müller, and he wants to get by. He wants to get into the lead, get as many BMWs behind him as possible, because look further back, Andy Prio is in trouble. There's an Alfa Romeo alongside inside him? No, he's managed to hold him off there. Can't see which of the Alphas it is. The white mirrors, I think, is Gabriele Tarquini, so that, I think, makes that the number 2 car of Fabrizio Giovanardi. Giovanardi, a very aggressive starter and racer it is. Giovanardi already passed Andy Prio, so the BMW GB car in Alfa Romeo trouble already. Tavano, his car not as updated as the factory red cars. It's one of last year's spec cars, the 156 GTA. This year's car is called the 156 S2000. The Super 2000 S2000 nomenclature refers to the 2-litre engine capacity rather than the year in which the rules were introduced, which was not 2000, confusingly. So here's Tarquini also lining up. Oh, but look at this! Prio deep into the final corner, using his tyres for all they're worth at the beginning of the race, just in case they're not worth much at the end. They both get by Tavano, but he's still in an all-red sandwich, and you saw from the onboard that the Alfa is starting to catch. And behind this, incidentally, as we see a replay of the move, behind this is Jan Magnussen. I'm pretty sure I could see the silver Peugeot as leader of the next group, and Garcia still holding off the Schnitzer boys. Jörg and Dirk Muller, second and third, desperate to get past because now there's 2 Alphas behind them. And I thought that maybe Jörg Muller was over-dramatising the problems of keeping the Alphas back. Here we are on lap 2 of 13, and I withdraw that wholeheartedly. I don't think he was making any bones about it. He was absolutely telling it the way it is. Well, David, look at Giovanardi and Tarquini. They've really got the bit between their teeth, and there's only 3 BMWs and 10 laps to dispose of them. It's not going to take them that long, surely. Here comes Giovanardi.
We can see Giovanardi there trying very hard, line himself on the outside into that corner, took a switch to the inside to try and come out that a little bit quicker. He did say how much easier it is for the Alphas to get out of the corner than what the BMWs are. But here's the 2 work Schnitzer cars stuck behind Garcia with the Spanish-struck Italian BMW, and the works cars really want to get past Garcia in order to try and put someone between themselves and these 2 Alfa Romeos of Giovanardi and Tarquini, and that's not happening. Garcia is definitely holding everybody up here and making a big queue behind him, and we can see now that Andy Prio is right on the back of that, so you've now got 5-6 cars there before you come back to the privateer of Tavano
and Farfus, and then in fact it's Alex Zanardi now leading the next group, so all top 8 together. But look at the speed on the straight. Giovanardi just pulls out of the toe and off he goes, and here comes Tarquini as well, 4th gear left hand kink. Now there's a bit of a break going in, but the Alphas just pop out, zoom by and do 1 car at a time, and that's all they need to do, David, is wait for the front straight. Unless they somehow really mess up the final corner, they can get by a car a lap every time on the front straight. They've got 9 laps to go and only 2 cars in front of them. It's just like taking candy from a baby.
And when you see them come out of the corners, they're not actually using the whole circuit. Yes, they're cutting the corners across the curbs like everybody else, but on that second corner, when they came out of there, they didn't use the whole circuit. The BMWs are right out, right across the curbs, using everything. And there's the Alfa Romeos. Yes, they're using a bit of curb, but certainly not as much as the BMWs, and they are trying very hard. A lot of pressure on there to try and keep Giovanardi behind Muller there.
Well, Muller is having to try and defend desperately and try and get past Garcia. You can see Garcia's viewpoint. He's leading. He's not in the same team. It's the beginning of the championship. He wants maximum points, and for goodness sake, he's home in Spain. Where else can you expect him to just cling on for grim death? But he couldn't possibly be doing a better job to help the Alfa Romeos if he tried. He's really balking Jürgen Dirk Muller. We've already seen that Dirk Muller has fallen prey to Giovanardi and Tarquini, and Jörg desperately defending. Don't forget his car, 40 kilos, 88 pounds. Another person in his car compared to the Alfa Romeos. Not a heavy person, but another person sitting in the car as well compared to the Alfa Romeos. And it doesn't sound like a lot, only 40 kilos, but it is a big extra weight. It's a good 5 or 6% heavier than the other cars, which again doesn't seem like an awful lot, but under braking and acceleration, it's just enough to make the car run that little bit wider, little harder to stop, little harder to accelerate. and with a speed differential against the Alfa Romeos anyway. And look, next corner, Giovanardi puts his nose up the inside. Garcia sees the danger. He's not going to win the race in the gravel. Alfas get by, job done, and now they'll disappear.
That's exactly what they did on the last lap to the Works BMW. They just lined themselves up along the straight, pulled out, came past. They were on the inside, but the BMW is having a fantastic fight in between there. Garcia still in front of the two Works BMWs. Andy Priaulx next up behind that, and now you've got another queue in behind that as well, because you've now got Farfus right up there. Tavano's still there with his privateer Alfa Romeo, and this is a big pile of cars all fighting at the front of this race to try and get as many points as possible.
Oh, and Farfus down the inside of Andy Priaulx again. Last corner, I mean, this is like PlayStation racing. It really is. You can just throw the car anywhere you like. You know, when you race in a simulation, generally speaking, the opposition. Oh, and there's Garcia gone finally, and that's what started all that off. Garcia just resisting one time too many, got collected by Jörg Müller, I think. And Jörg Müller now the lead of the Schnitzer cars, but Farfus down the inside into the final corner. Cheerio, bye-bye. Alfa Romeo 1, 2 and 3, and I think the only thing left to settle out as Jörg runs wide and Dirk Müller gets alongside him and Andy Priaulx's behind is in which order the Alfas will finish and where the BMW GB car and Schnitzer cars will end up. I think 4th, 5th and 6th, but in which order remains to be seen. It is certainly not going to be anything than an Alfa Romeo 1, 2, 3. But my question for you, David, is can Tarquini safely pass Giovanardi this time, like Giovanardi couldn't on Tarquini the previous time?
I'm not sure about that. I'm sure the two of them will have a battle all the way to the finish to try and get that, but certainly Farfus is through into third, and I can see him pulling away from the BMWs now. But what we do see is Andy Priaulx split the Works cars, split the two Müller cars, but behind that, the pole sitter, Tavano, with his Oregon team, the brightly coloured car, is right on the tail. And this is a totally privateer team with a one-year-old car sitting right on the back of the Works BMW cars. And I'm sure BMW are scratching their heads at this moment in time thinking, what are we going to do to try and compete with these Alfa Romeos? The Works cars have disappeared out in front, and even the privateer cars here at this circuit at Valencia are giving them a real hard time.
So, you know, I think that does show you the difference in development, doesn't it, year on year, that basically BMW and last year's Alfas are pretty level. This year's Alfas, however, as we can clearly see, have moved on into another racing group entirely. And further back, the next group back, incidentally, you're just getting sights of it behind Tavano in 7th, Alex Zanardi in 8th, Tom Coronel in 9th, he's the second of the independents, a white BMW with a day-glow yellow windscreen strip, and Antonio Garcia down in 10th place. So Alex Zanardi, the former champ car race, still racing strongly. 8th place will get him into the points, and behind him Luca Rangoni and Stefano D'Aste with Hane and Rydell 13 and 15th at the moment from the back of the grid. Well, we're hearing that stewards are going to look at the move with Augusto Farfus and the 42 car Dirk Müller, and I'm assuming that that will be the one that ended up with Antonio Garcia facing in the wrong direction. I have to say, I don't think there was any cynical thumping and spinning to winning there. I think that was just a mistake by Garcia and two other cars trying to get by him, where there was really actually only room for one, never mind three. And that's the way it's going to be in wheel banging door-to-door racing, and that's the way we want it. And I have to say, if the stewards are going to start climbing on things, they missed a few really cynical bumping and boring manoeuvres in the past, chiefly by drivers in red cars, it has to be said, and to be starting stamping on actual racing is not the way to go. Andy Priaulx with Jörg Müller right behind him, Dirk Müller just in front, still giving Farfus a run for his money, David, and it looks like Farfus may not quite have the speed of the other two guys, because there's some good battles going on here.
No, certainly the other two guys, when they got through, they did get a gap, and Farfus was the one that was left on his own to try and fight to get past the BMWs a little bit later on. He did do that, but as you say, Dirk Muller's now stuck to the back of Farfus, and I think it's always that little bit easier when you're following somebody to try and keep up with them, but it is when they're a long way away and you're trying to catch them up. But these guys are all on the limit, right on the very ragged edge. And you can see with the three BMWs, starting with Dirk Muller, Andy Prio, and then Jörg Muller, they're all trying their best. You come out of these corners, see using all of the curbs, right up to the gravel and everything. Whereas the Alfa Romeo, when it comes out of the corner, yes, it uses a bit of the curb, but not all of the curb, and not all the way up to the gravel. So they are very much handling very well, as well as the fact they've got a very good engine in a straight line, and they can simply pull out and pass whatever they want if the straight's long enough. So if you go to the faster circuits like we were at Monza last time, and like we're going to go to Magny-Cours the next time, these Alfa Romeos are going to be very difficult to beat this year.
Jan Magnussen has brought his car into the pits, and he is out of the race, unfortunately, in the Danish entered Peugeot 307. And Magnussen, of course, ex-Formula 1, ex-Champ Car, ex-American Le Mans Series driver, and he's very much a mark of the kind of calibre of this field. May not necessarily know the names of some of these guys, the newcomers like Augusto Farfus or Andy Prio. Andy Prio from last year's championship. Been racing now, this is third year in touring cars. Before that, raced in Formula 3 single-seaters in Great Britain, very strongly in the British Championship. But look at the calibre of the field. Fabrizio Giovanardi, 6 times a touring car champion with the Auto Delta Alfa Romeo team, and raced in single-seaters up to Formula 1. Gabriele Tarquini, former British, former Italian touring car champion, also raced in Formula 1. Augusto Farfus Jr. 2 years ago, and last year racing in single-seaters in Formula Renault. And that's a sort of intermediate single-seater category in the European Championship. Dirk Muller and Jörg Muller both started in single-seaters. Jörg Muller, in fact, racing in Formula 3000 for a couple of seasons and tested the BMW Williams Formula 1 car. And, of course, both of them also raced in the American Le Mans Series. Dirk Muller started as a Porsche driver with Alex Job Racing and moved on to BMW, joined the Schnitzer team alongside Jörg Muller, who at that stage was racing the prototypes with the likes of JJ Leto, and they have been Schnitzer BMW drivers for many years. This is number 8 car of Rickard Rydell, the Swede's car, with heavy frontal damage out of race 1, and I wonder if that's a legacy of that as well. Looked like he stopped without too much damage, so possibly the car overheating or has blown something as a result of its first race shunt. On board with, David.
It's very difficult when you have a big accident like Rydell had, because there's lots of damage. You've only got 15 minutes to turn these cars around between the first race and the second race. Very difficult to make sure it's reliable.
Giovanardi leads Tarquini and Farfus making an Alpha 1, 2, 3 in Valencia. Alfa Romeo's dominant in race 4 of the European Touring Car Championship in Valencia in Spain, as they were in race 3 and as they were in Monza in Italy in the opening pair of races of the championship. Certainly the new look Auto Delta Alfa Romeo GTA is the quickest thing out there on the racetrack. The question that remains to be asked is which of these two will finish first. Giovanardi in the number 2 car, or the man who he beats to the championship last year, Gabriele Tarquini, his teammate Fabrizio Giovanardi in the BMW, the previous year's champion in 2002, went to BMW in 2003, and really a very lackluster season. I think he needed the change just to find out how much he was in a comfort zone in the Alfa Romeo team. Well, he was certainly welcomed back with open arms when he approached Alfa Romeo to rejoin them for the 2004 season, and comfort he certainly found. But no lack of competition. In previous years, Giovanardi was being chased by former Grand Prix driver Nicola Larini all the way to the championship, and now he's got Gabriele Tarquini. Larini has moved on to other things. He's involved in the Maserati project, as we see Alex Zanardi and Tom Coronel. Tom Coronel with a yellow roof and windscreen strip, the independent racer, and Alex Zanardi in the BMW Italia Spain entry, run by Roberto Ravaglia and Umberto Grano, his chief engineer. Ravaglia, former European touring car champion, as was Umberto Grano half a generation before him. Umberto Grano, one of the great European touring car names of the 70s. When you think of guys like Twan Hazemans, Dieter Glemser and all of those guys, Umberto Grano goes in the same breath for students of closed roof touring car racing. Great battle between these two drivers, both very fair, very clean, very charismatic drivers, and Tom Coronel at the moment with the advantage, and homing in from behind is Jorge Hene, the ex-Grand Prix driving Spaniard in the Seat Toledo. Seat, of course, the Italian arm of the Volkswagen Group, the VW Audi Group. And Seat, well, looking for better things here after practice than they have managed to achieve in the race. Unfortunately, the Toledo's looking pretty sharp in qualifying and practice, but just not holding it together. Antonio Garcia and Luca Rangoni. Garcia goes off again. Well, now the stewards are looking at Dirk Muller and Augusto Farfus's move on Garcia that saw him spun out at the final corner a few laps ago. There was clearly no contact at all there with Luca Rangoni. Garcia managed to spin the car himself. I wonder whether that might be taken in as part of the evidence, David. If you were a steward, would you be looking at an incident like that as well to suggest perhaps that Garcia had a problem with the car?
Certainly, the car has spun again for a second time, and I think it's up to the one of the teams to start to say what's going wrong. We can see the reason why it spun there. On the replay, he took far too much of the curb, launched the car up in the air, and when it came down, it just simply turned itself around. So that was totally his own doing. We did say that beforehand, that Rangoni wasn't right behind him, wasn't going to touch him at all, but that was all his own doing. And the stewards have these same pictures that we have. In fact, they have more pictures than what we have to watch and look at and decide whether it's right or it's wrong, or what they decide is fair and not fair. But I'm sure they will decide later, after the race is finished, rather than during the race, and try and impose something like a drive-through penalty or a stop-and-go 10-second penalty or something like that during the race, because it's always better to find out two sides of a story after the race and sort it out than it is to simply give a 10-second penalty in the middle of the race and suddenly discover afterwards that, well, maybe that wasn't quite right. But the stewards have a set of rules that they are here to, and it's up to them to make sure that everything is fair and square in this motorsport.
Absolutely right. It's only a 30-mile race, 13 laps, so there's not really time to make those decisions and impose them during the course of the race. And you usually get a much better judgment by being able to watch lots of videotape angles and reverse angles and so on. On board with the 43 car of Dirk Muller, still chasing Augusto Farfus Jr. for third place. So having said that an Alfa Romeo 123 is a dead cert, it may not be yet. Farfus tyres may give out towards the end of the race. The front drive cars, the steering, the braking and the power transmission, all done by those front tyres. The rear end, well, the tyres just keep the exhaust from dragging on the ground, essentially, almost literally in a front drive touring car. In the rear drive car, of course, front tyres don't work quite so hard. They carry the braking weight and most of the steering effort, but the power is driven through the rear tyres, and that gives a much more even tyre wear, much less punishing on the front tyres. And this left-handed circuit is very unusual in motor racing. Generally, circuits go clockwise. Not quite sure why they do generally, but generally they do. Certainly European road racing course is very much in the clockwise idiom. But Valencia, an anti-clockwise circuit, and it just gives a different kind of feeling to the drivers who are so much more used to spending more of their time turning right than left. Here it's the opposite way round.
It's one of those funny little things about circuits, just setting the car up. Most people set a car up to go around right-hand corners, and there is a small difference, and provided the engineers remember that and set the cars up so that most of the weight is on the other front wheel. Normally on right-hand circuits, the right-hand front wheel would be slightly heavier than the left. And certainly if you come to a left-hand circuit like this, the engineers are going to remember and turn that around and make sure the left-hand front wheel is probably just that little bit heavier than the right, in order to most of the corners being left-handers.
Longer races than this, of course, you might see fatigue building up in drivers' neck muscles that they wouldn't normally experience. The head normally being pushed one way and here being pushed predominantly the other way might be a little bit of a factor, but generally driver fitness is so good that that's not going to be really too much of a retrograde effect, and certainly not in a race of this short distance. Now ahead of Andy Prio, who is defending hard against Jörg Muller, you can see Dirk Muller making last lap efforts and Augusto Farfus at the first hairpin. Here is the battle. Gabriele Tarquini, the reigning champion, chasing Fabrizio Giovanardi last lap, and I think that Tarquini will probably just sit there knowing that he outscored Giovanardi in the first race, and he's only going to lose a couple of points to him in this race, David. Still 8 championship meetings, 16 races left to go. No point in chucking another set of points away, as happened in Monza with a clash between the two of them.
No, I think they learned a very hard lesson in Monza when they lost so many points because of that accident, and I'm pretty sure that they will finish first and second. I still think if there's a slightest mistake by Giovanardi at all, Tarquini will be straight in there, will dive down the inside, will take whatever opportunity is given to him, and even if it means taking the door mirrors off and damaging the door handles, he'll still be in there taking that opportunity, but certainly not to the point whereby they're actually going to take each other off the circuit, or even one of them off the circuit.
Well, I was going to say, yes, it doesn't matter if he damages his own door mirrors as long as he gets to the line. But I think you're right. I think in the light of Monza, Giovanardi and Tarquini will probably be just that little bit more careful than they might be perhaps if they're still vying each other for the championship at the final race. Checkered flag then, it's win number 1 for Fabrizio Giovanardi this season. Gabriele Tarquini in second place. The two winners at Monza, Augusto Farfus and Jörg Müller, both finishing in the top half dozen. Farfus third here, Jörg Müller in 6th place. Behind this car, Andy Prio and Dirk Müller in 4th spot. Couldn't get past Augusto Farfus. Salvatore Tavano and Luca Rangoni 7th and 8th, picking up full points, but in fact they're in the Independence Trophy, so they will score 1st and 2nd in the Independence Trophy for the Oregon Racing team. And that's a very strong run from those two ex-Works Alfa Romeo drivers, or ex-Works Alfa Romeo cars, in the Oregon Racing team. Oregon's first season in the European Touring Car Championship, and a little punch of the air there of Dirk Müller as he comes across the line. Well, the best that they could do is be right behind the Alfa Romeos here. That was evident from qualifying, unless there was rain, in which case all bets are off, and the BMW really does have then a very level playing field against the Alfa Romeos. But we have not had a seriously wet European Touring Car meeting for a year and a season and a half, really, since Brno 2002 in the Czech Republic, when that was hailstorms and everything else. There is the result then. Dirk Müller, Jörg Müller getting ahead of Andy Prio right at the line. Didn't see that one happen on the cameras, but in fact the timing screen hasn't caught up with that either. It's still on lap 12, so we'll take the results as a given for that. Giovanardi, Tarquini and Farfus, Müller and Prio, Tavano, Rangoni and Coronel, the top 3 independents. Zanardi in 10th. Hordy in 11th, in the only Seat to finish either of the races. That's a bad retrograde step for Seat, but another red wash, David Leslie, and I don't think that Magny-Cours in a fortnight's time, the super speedway that is the home of the French Grand Prix, is really going to give the BMWs much hope for reversing this situation in a hurry.
No, I'm afraid not. We can see here the championship positions. Alfa Romeo's 1st and 2nd there. Tarquini and Giovanardi, and not far away was Augusto Farfus Jr. Remember, he had no points from the first meeting. He's still 6th in the championship now, but the BMW's then filling in the places from 3rd, 4th and 5th.
So Alfa Romeo dominant here as they were in Monza and may well be in France. BMW between a rock and a red place.